Very good.
Mr. Chair, I wish to take up some of the challenge of the previous speaker, not least because not only is it a repeated misrepresentation of some of the nonsense we've heard from the Minister previously, which was ably refuted by my colleague Moana Maki, so I'm not going to go over the answers. I just ask that member to have a look at the Hansard of Moana Maki, who shot down that stupid claim very easily. I want to deal with two things in particular, and they do go to the question of responsibility, Mr. Peachy. The first thing I want to refer to is Clause 10 again, and I ask the members opposite, and I ask the Minister to consider the word compassion. This legislation lacks any compassion. In the rush to perpetuate the Minister's falsehoods around the financial status of ACC, the Minister has wrapped values and sentiments with which this party does not associate. And the lack of compassion is one of them. If the Minister had ever bothered to talk to the architect of ACC, Sir Owen Woodhouse, who is a member of the Order of New Zealand, in his 90s, and still well able to lecture the Minister on what was meant by the system and how it is working, he would have found that in fact suicide was intended to be in the original report. It was intended to be there. Ask Sir Owen Woodhouse, Minister, instead of sitting there shaking your head like a clown at a sideshow in a fair, all you need to do is open your mouth, Minister, and then you'd have the complete picture. But what the Minister needs to do is understand that suicide was always intended to be there. And it was simply, as Sir Owen has said elsewhere, the religious convictions of one of the commissioners that prevented it from being there at that time 40 years ago. And that compensation should not be paid out to people who were committing, in their view, a mortal sin. We have come a long way since then. And I think of the young people I know who have attempted suicide and survived. Survived for a range of reasons, not the least being good medical intervention. And then they have rehabilitated through the provisions of ACC. And I would ask members opposite not to throw compassion away in some drive, misguided though it be, to make ACC seemingly more cost-effective. There is more at stake here than money. I want to go to the next point, Mr. Chairman, which is about responsibility. And one of the things that has always been a difficulty, or at least has in the 9 years that we were in government, was to address injury prevention and to address rates of rehabilitation that do beleaguer some of our efforts and some of the things we aspire to achieve through our ACC system. The injury prevention issue was taken so seriously by the previous government, unlike this Minister who wants to wipe it out of the language and the name of this legislation. Injury prevention was taken so seriously that a cross-disciplinary injury prevention strategy was devised. And that was launched by my predecessor in the portfolio, Ruth Dyson, and I had the privilege of working along with the people who were trying to prevent injury. There were 6 work streams. I'm not going to go through all the details, but can I just say that some of them were obvious. Road transport accidents, drownings, violence, falls, and suicide prevention. Those were some of the work streams under the injury prevention strategy, and they brought together officials from justice, from police, from corrections, from health, from education, from Mr. Chairman.
Call the Honourable Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And they brought together a raft of officials across government departments to address injury prevention. And there were some interesting findings that came out of that, not the least of them being that across all 6, I think, of the work streams, alcohol was a factor. And so 19% of drownings are affected by alcohol. People go out on a boat, have a few drinks, fall over the edge, and that's it. 19%, 1 in 5, more or less. Similarly, falls are precipitated in large measure by alcohol. We know that alcohol accounts for a significant proportion of our road transport accidents. It also accounts for at least 30% of the violent acts that are done in public places, not to mention domestic violence. And what was the purpose of all of this? The purpose of these work streams and finding out this information was precisely to take responsibility. To take responsibility for injury prevention at a government level across a raft of government departments. And we started to see some improvements. We have seen fewer drownings in recent years than years before. We have seen a drop in road transport accidents and deaths. We have seen some awareness begin about the kinds of things that one needs to do in order to effect a comprehensive and complicated injury prevention strategy, Minister. And what this is doing in this legislation not only erases injury prevention from the very title and from the purpose of the legislation, but completely negates any sense of compassion, any sense of the purpose of education. Because what did we hear frequently from that party opposite when they were in opposition? We heard a lot about nanny state, and we didn't like government ads on television. We didn't like government interfering and telling people how to run their lives, like how to be safe in the water, how to avoid road transport accidents, how to drink sensibly, how to avoid and to report domestic violence. And so what did we have from the nanny statists opposite? We had that accusation that the government should be playing no part in this. Now, Mr. Peachy, that is irresponsible, and that is what your party and this wretched minister is doing, in that he is not applying any sense of responsibility to injury prevention and to accidents in this legislation. This is the party that took responsibility to try to address injury prevention and rehabilitation rates. And from this minister, we get half-truths, we get stuff that is purely misleading. If that is the least polite thing I can say in the House about it, this minister is misleading. Not only that, he is incompetent. This is a serious issue that works across a range of government departments and goes right to the heart of the responsibility of government for its citizens. If we know this information, if we know that alcohol affects 6 of the main causes of injury, it is a government's responsibility to do something about it. Not the government's responsibility, Dr. Coleman who's a medical practitioner, to sit behind his papers and pretend that what this minister says is even remotely useful. It is a disgrace. This is a disgrace. And this legislation will take us back, because there is no responsibility being taken for injury prevention or for rehabilitation. Yes, these are difficult issues, but they're not going to be solved. They're not going to be cured. They're not going to be addressed in our society by legislation